Cool. Good morning. That was lame. Before I start with my talk, I actually would like to invest 2 minutes into the really great crew behind this conference. Because there are these 5 guys, these 5 people on stage here, they invested weeks, months into organizing that. And they do it all for nothing. I mean, not for nothing, we have fun here, but not for a financial value. I think that's really extraordinary. So I would like to start with a huge, huge applause for the guys behind the conference. Wait 1 second, not only for these 5, but think also about the people behind the scenes. Think about the tech crew, think about the people preparing food, think about the coffee guy. How important is he, right? So please give a big, big round of applause for all these people. I think it's great what you do. All right. All right. That was nice. That was nice. In design theory, there is a name for what you just did. We call this a shitty first start. So I would like you now to think about, do some design research on your own. How could you improve this applause? Think about stamping your feet, think about standing ovations, think about whistling, think about shouting. Make some noise for these guys, come on! That was great. I'm sorry for that. Okay, that was great for everyone but one. Sorry for that. All right. Shit. Okay, starting week from now on, we'll just go downwards. I can't fuck that up any harder anymore. All right. Some of you might be familiar with a book I published together with Jacob in 2010. It's quite old, actually. I don't recommend to buy it anymore. After that, we've done a lot of projects in service design. We kind of moved up into strategic consulting. So I suddenly was helping organizations to put service design in their structures, in their processes, sometimes even trying to put it into the culture of these organizations. And then 2 years ago, we stopped. We stopped with doing projects, and we had these 2 little side projects, our 2 startups, Maply and Experience Fellow, and we used the chance to build a software company, not a service design agency, not a consultancy, but a software company built on the basic idea of service design. So we really try to put service design in the DNA of a company. What I would like to talk about today is to share a few lessons learned from, on the one hand, bringing service design into big organizations, and on the other hand, building a company based on service design. And I will actually highlight not so much the good aspects, but the thing which goes wrong there. I think our main job, especially when we bring service design in big organizations, is that we're breaking down silos. And I think we all agree with that. And if I think about yesterday and the talks we saw that, many talks actually mentioned that. But at the same time, in the last, let's say, 2 years, as the service design community, we are starting to discuss what is service design, what is design thinking, what is customer experience design or experience design, what is UX, and so on and so forth. And by that, what we're actually doing, by trying to define and restrict all that, is we're building new silos. I would like to ask you to look beyond the terminology and understand what actually are the similarities of all these approaches. Because in all the different organizations I worked with, they all call it differently. But if you look beyond the terminology, they're all doing the same. So we shouldn't build new silos, but actually think about how can we cooperate better, how can we break down silos in organizations. If you ask me what is the difference between service design, design thinking, service design thinking, my answer to that is rather short. And I get this question quite often. I like it because it's a short answer. And the reason why we called our book, This is Service Design Thinking, was actually because we wanted to raise a discussion. Is this service design, or is this design thinking? Is this something completely different? Well, we completely failed with that, because now there are agencies doing service design thinking, now there are departments and companies doing service design thinking, so we didn't raise a discussion, we just created a huge mess with that. Sorry about that. I try to clean it up now a little bit, but yeah. How do organizations bring service design in? We talk a lot about sprints there, right? Service design sprints, again, a lot of names for that. And if you look at that, there are different models behind that. This is how a sprint looks like, different terminology, different names behind that, but it mostly looks like that. I would like to go that bit by bit now a little bit. We often start with research, and we always have this discussion, quantitative versus qualitative. I often hear these prejudices, management only relies on quantitative data, designers only rely on qualitative data. I think it's crap, and I think it's not helpful. We need both. It's quite simple. Both have strong advantages. With quantitative tools, you can measure KPIs over time. You understand where there is a problem when it pops up. With qualitative tools, you get actionable insights. So stuff you can really use and change stuff. So we need both. When we go on, we then use the data we collect, no matter which methods we use, and we somehow visualize that. We use tools like personas, stakeholder maps, journey maps. And we identify critical stuff, and we use our research insights to somehow improve that. Quite straightforward, right? The problem we have here is that this is really common sense for us. But what I see very often, and I have a quite strong opinion about that, is that people, especially in middle or higher management, come together in a room, they heard about this service design, they heard about journey maps, they read it in articles on Harvard Business Review or something, and they come together with a bunch of Post-its and create an assumption-based journey map. Without any input on research, without involving frontline staff, without involving any users. So purely based on their assumptions. They might get a graphic designer in to visualize that, so it looks good, but that's it. And then they use these assumption-based journey maps for strategic decisions. What could possibly go wrong? And that's something I see very often. I think we have to bring this message across wherever we talk, whenever we do this. We need research, and we need to base it on that. If we move on in the sprint, we create many ideas. I think organizations actually don't have problems with creating many ideas if you set it up correctly. You can have a constant influx of ideas. The problem we have often is rather to select a few. We use tools like an idea portfolio where we try to estimate how big would be the impact of that, how big actually is the feasibility. And we start with a few quick wins up here. And then sometimes gives you the budget for a bigger project. But think about this strategically as well. Sometimes you need to start here as well. Sometimes you need to start with, well, the elephant in the room, the really ugly stuff. Working on infrastructure, which costs a lot of money, but actually has no impact on the customer. But this might allow you, in the long run, to create really cool stuff. Sometimes we need to start there. If we move on, we move into prototyping. I'll speed it up now a little bit. Prototyping, we use a simple model for that, where we try to estimate for every feature, for every epic, for every job to be done, no matter which framework you use for that. And we try to estimate what is the complexity of this thing. Is this a low complexity, so something we can change immediately, and we don't need to put a lot of effort into prototyping, into testing, into iterations, because we can just change it, so just change it. With increasing complexity, we need to increase our efforts in prototyping iterations. And then there are these two red zones. And especially big companies are good with the one in the lower right corner. They're good at wasting time. They're good at over-managing with a lot of decision makers in this process where you need to go through a lot of presentations until you can make small changes. It's a waste of time. On the other hand, if I think about our startups, especially small teams, startups are really good with the other red corner, with the one on the upper left-hand side. You underestimate the complexity of this task. You think, oh, that's simple, just do it. And then when you start doing it, you realize how complex this actually is. Either you launch a product which is not ready to launch, or you learn it the hard way on your way then. Let's move on. I would say another statement here. Journey maps is not a deliverable. It's not, service design doesn't, oh, look at that. Service design doesn't end with nice visualizations. These are just tools we use, tools to communicate, tools to work on. They should be actually dynamic tools, not static tools. And too often I see projects ending with a really beautiful journey map or service blueprint, and then you have a passover and to the production department. Hey, you guys now just have to make that, right? That's not going to work. We need to design for impact. That's why I love the title of this conference. So I would like to give you 2 examples for how you bring stuff out from our own company. We are a software company, so for us, launching something new is really simple. It's basically clicking a button, and then it's out there. Which gives us a great advantage that we can launch stuff which is not yet ready. So we launch stuff like alpha stage, where we clearly communicate, this is not final yet. This is something we're still working on. We ask you actively for feedback. If you go back to the different departments of an organization, depending on the literature you read, depending on the models you believe in, you might call this differently. And I saw many arguments in organizations simply because they use different language for exactly the same thing. Is this a prototype? Is it a pilot? Is it an experiment? An MVP? Does it matter? Often we get hung up in these language issues. But we need to look beyond that. And we also need to look beyond our products, our service, whatever is the core of what we create. So we design a software, but we need to design for the user and their problems. I would like to give you a few examples of what we also see as implementation. So we see that the main problem of our users is they want to bring service design and this way of working into their organizations. So what we do is we created stickers and posters with slogans like customer experience is more than fucking metrics. And they hang it up in the office. They use it to bring this message across. We also speak at conferences about that. And not just to our peers like we do it here, but we speak at leadership conferences at Harvard University, for example, to talk to those who actually are in the position to give budgets and to make them understand that this is the way of working. We create guidebooks so to help people in an organization to, well, spread how journey mapping and the like is working. And all that, so we need to look beyond our product and understand really what is the customer experience and how can we help our users in that. So, that's a sprint. And basically all I talked about was bullshit. I hate these visualizations because they are not true. They don't reflect reality. How does it really look like? Might like that. So you realize at any point in this process you don't have enough research, so you need to go back and do more research. Or at any point during prototyping, you realize, oh shoot, this is not going to work. We need another idea, so you go back. Or during research, you identify something so damn obvious that you don't need to prototype that you don't need to visualize a journey map. You just need to change it. And we know that. You know that. We're all designers. That works. The problem is, as soon as you visualize it as a circle or as any kind of sequence, we know it's theory, we know that practice works differently, but how should other people know that, who are not trained in this? So the question is there a loop? I don't think so. And it's getting worse. Depending on the literature you read, depending on the conferences you go to, there are all these great models out there. Lean startup, service design thinking, agile development, lean UX, it's all great stuff. But now something really strange happening. And as a warning, I used the visual on the next slide not because I hate this visual in particular. I just took it out of Google. I just searched for something like that as an example. We see some models like this now, where we try to squeeze all that stuff into one model. This is design thinking, then it stops, then you have lean UX, then it stops, then you have agile development, then it stops, and then comes growth hacking. What I see happening then in organizations is they again build different teams for that. So what we're doing is, again, we create silos. Silos. And then at some point in growth hacking, you realize, damn, we need more research. But you're a team. You don't have access to the users anymore because it's not in your job description. You're responsible for growth hacking. That is your process. Stick to the process. So I think we need to look beyond these models. And we need to understand that squeezing design in these models doesn't work. This is not what design is. So what is this lean, agile design thingy thing? How can we merge all this stuff somehow together? I don't think there is something like that. And I'd like to quote a friend of mine, Lauren Curry, who likes to say service design, if you look at that, actually is often just common sense. Unfortunately, it is not common practice. And when you look into the reasons why it is not common practice, among many others, you come up with these. There's still people who believe that you can plan projects from end to end. And they start to plan service design project with a Gantt chart, an MS project. But that doesn't work. The reality is different. We all know that. And as soon as you start to squeeze design processes into models, into silos again, they are not open and iterative anymore. And that is the core of what a design process is. It is about iterations. So I think we can agree on, no matter what we're working on, no matter how we call what we're doing in, we can agree on these three things. We understand that whatever we produce is never finished. There's never a final version of what we create. There will be always another version, a better version. We do this by creating many experiments. We test our assumptions. We challenge our assumptions. We include users and frontline staff into our process. Because we know we are not the user, as Tracy said yesterday. A talk I loved, by the way. And we know that we ask real humans. So we need to involve real people, not just statistics, but real people. In other words, it's about iterations, it's about prototyping, and it is about research. So I would ask you, in your own organizations, in the organizations of your clients you work with, have a look at their innovation processes, have a look at their design process, have a look at whatever they use. And think about it if the force behind all these models actually works there. Can you do iterations there? Can you do prototyping at any stage there? Can you do research at any stage there? Because I think this is really what connects everything there. Thank you.
Food for thought. I bet there are a few questions in the audience, and Adam is well prepared to throw the box around. Do I see hands?
It's a hangover spot.
Marcus.
I loved your talk. It's really nice, but I would like to challenge it as well. I mean, of course, these models are oversimplified, but I think I'll make a reference to Mauro's presentation yesterday. I think we need some sort of simplifications like this as a language of communication. And I would say we shouldn't throw them out. Rather, we should be always critical about them and use them as guides rather than. So, can you also touch on this point of what might be missing?
Yeah,
in that
happy
regard?
to. I totally agree with you. I mean, and I actually would go a step further. I think we in service design, or however we call what we're doing, we have a language problem. Because we think we have the same language, we think we use the same terminology, but in fact we don't. I would like to do a quick test. Could you all please shout out examples for channels? Channels. Communication distribution channel. Just shout out some examples.
Slack.
All right, thank you. Thank you. Could you please shout out some examples for touch points? Is it the same? Is it different? How is it different? There you go. It is not that simple. We think we have agreed on a language, but we didn't. And that's something we need to work on. If we don't have a consistent language to talk with each other about what we're doing, how can we talk to management? They don't have time to go into the details there. They just want to understand how this works. And if we are not consistent with that, we have a problem to explain that. Going back to your questions, yes, we need to simplify that. We need to show processes. What we shouldn't do, though, is use these processes and build silos around these processes again. We need to educate the others. We need to educate the decision makers. And this is stuff I like to do with presentations at other conferences. And I ask you, go to management conferences, go to marketing conferences, educate people there. Show them not only simplified models, because they only see the model. They come back and say, okay, we need a department for growth hacking. And, oh yeah, and service design we need as well. But they do research, they don't. I think that's a problem we have.
Okay, so you spoke about language and terminology that we are using. So your next book is This is Service Design Doing. So why are you adding another term again? And if that's different and it's not the same thing called in another way, what is different in that?
You mean what's different in that book?
No, I mean, if design doing is just another terminology, why are you adding that? And if it's different, what is different?
All right, cool. So no, we don't want to add another thing in there. No. It's not big enough here, but actually behind service design there's a little one, and underneath, or it's called like also how you call it, design thinking, experience design, whatever. So actually we want to clean up that mess a bit. However, what we want to do with this book is we want to take a little step into defining our language. Like, what are tools, what are methods, what's the difference here? How do you call these things? And this should be a starting point for further discussion so we can actually define our language. If people from IT come together on a project, they have a language and everybody around the table knows exactly what they're talking about. They can focus on the content because the language is clear. When service designers get together, they first need to agree on the language. They need to say, well, how do you call this? Is this a user map or is it a journey map? Is there a difference between blueprinting here for you and journey mapping there, or is it the same? Because we don't have a really clearly defined language for that. And that's what we try to achieve. So we don't want to add another thing. We said it doesn't matter how you call it. Let's get beyond that and focus on the language, how we actually work.
I really love the talk. And
where are you?
I'm here.
Ah, hi. Sorry.
I sign up for all you've said, but working in an organization, especially a big one, when it comes to design thinking, we have all these processes with our loops and stuff, and it's extremely difficult to convince the managers already. And I have a little theory because I come from a different culture than Germany. And I find that the more you have models and you can present to them in a visual way, the more you take away the anxiety within the German environment. They really need to rely on the steps to know the way. So then if I show something like that can change, I feel like they're gonna totally freak out, and they're so not gonna sign up for that. And when we have like a workshop that is only one day, it's already really hard to do anything. And then if you're gonna agree on a language, that's also gonna be very hard. So how do you keep managers from freaking out? That's my question, basically.
I love that question. I think you could write another book about that. How to keep managers from freaking out. I love that. I think the biggest difference there, and again, I'm going back to all these different methods, no matter how you call the approach, is what they have in common is instead of classic linear management, where you do a really big decision here, and you put a lot of money into this project, and then you run for that for the next 6 months. And after 6 months, you get something, and either you're happy with that or not. But if you're happy with that or not depends on this big decision up here. This is often the management thinking right now. What all these practices have in common is that instead of having one big decision here, we do a very small decision here and take one tiny step. And then we do another tiny decision here and another tiny step. Small experiments, iterations. It's a very different way of thinking. And I agree that it just starts that management understands that this is actually really valuable. And you see, if we learn from other industries who went through a similar process, let's look at agile development. It started in the 90s with the Agile Manifesto, right? And where are we right now with that? Is this the common practice? I don't think so. Many big organizations still do waterfall. And they get tiny steps into this, well, let's try this agile a little bit. So I think we have to manage also our expectations. This will not change within the next 1 or 2 years. This will take time. But it is starting. If Harvard Business Review writes about design thinking and that organizations need to do that, that is only the starting point. That doesn't mean that we are there yet. This is just the starting point that they get interested in that this topic becomes a topic at their conferences, within their education programs. So now service design just starts to become part of MBA programs, of executive education. I'm actually pretty proud that service design in Austria become part of the high school curricula. And we're educating teachers there who are teaching for the first time high school students across whole Austria with service design for 1 year. And this is the first year they're doing it, after 3 years of training. Imagine how long it will take until these kids are in the position that they can have major decision in companies. This is the time span we need to look at. So don't expect that it's going to change immediately. It will take time, and it needs us to be really clear about that, to enforce our message again and again.